They called it laughing gas, the harmless high that made people giggle and forget. For decades, it floated around nightclubs and festivals, hidden behind flashing lights and fog machines. No one thought much of it. It was just part of the nightlife, something between a joke and a thrill. But beneath the laughter, something darker was brewing. Because somewhere between Amsterdam and Los Angeles, someone figured out how to turn that same gas into gold. When federal agents stormed a quiet warehouse outside Baltimore in the winter of 2022, they weren't expecting to find anything unusual. They thought they were following up on a lead, a mislabeled shipment from Europe. But when they cracked open the containers, what spilled out wasn't oil, or cleaning solution, or the medical supplies listed on the manifest. It was nitrous oxide, 5,000 liters of it, enough to fuel every club, rave, and private party on the East Coast for months. And that was just the beginning. His name was Evan Riker, 36 years old, small-town doctor turned medical supplier. By day, he sold anesthesia-grade gases to hospitals across the Midwest. By night, he ran a different kind of business, one that made him more money than his medical career ever could. Evan knew chemistry, he knew supply chains, and he knew people, especially the kind willing to pay for a legal high. What started as a side hustle, selling a few tanks to a local party promoter, turned into something far bigger. Within 2 years, he had built an entire import network disguised as a medical supply company called Aerolux Distributors. On paper, Aerolux looked clean. Shipments labeled industrial coolant or dental sedation mix moved quietly through ports in Boston, Norfolk, and Miami. But each cylinder carried one hidden number, a coded serial that traced back to a factory in Belgium. From there, the gas traveled across the Atlantic, through shell companies and forged customs papers, landing neatly in Evan's hands. Nitrous oxide wasn't new. It had been used in dentistry for more than a century, nicknamed laughing gas for its euphoric effect. But around 2020, the market shifted. Nightlife came roaring back after the pandemic, and demand for party drugs skyrocketed. In cities like Los Angeles, New York, and Atlanta, underground suppliers started calling it hippie crack. The rush was short but intense, the kind of high that burned fast and begged for more. And because nitrous oxide wasn't classified as a controlled substance like cocaine or heroin, law enforcement didn't pay much attention. Evan saw the loophole and he exploited it. He started small. A few canisters here and there sold to event organizers under the table. But by the time 2021 rolled around, he was importing tons at a time. His European partners handled the paperwork. His stateside crew managed distribution. And the profits? They were staggering. What cost him $15 per liter overseas sold for nearly $200 in American nightlife circles. But money had a way of changing everything, especially Evan. The operation spread fast. Within a year, Aerolux had quietly connected with suppliers in Antwerp, London, and Vancouver. The network was simple, too simple. Every order moved through encrypted emails, paid via cryptocurrency, and recorded under fake purchase orders for surgical-grade nitrogen. But behind the efficiency was a mess of human weakness, greed, fear, and trust in all the wrong people. One of those people was Maya Lopez, a customs broker with a side hustle of her own. Maya was sharp, ambitious, and tired of playing by the rules. Evan paid her double what she made at her job to smooth the paperwork. At first, she thought she was helping move legitimate goods, until the day she followed one of the shipments to a warehouse in Baltimore and watched a team unload canisters straight into black market delivery vans. That night, she called Evan. Maya, you didn't tell me what I was moving. Evan, you didn't ask. And just like that, she became part of it. By the summer of 2022, nitrous oxide wasn't just in clubs anymore, it was everywhere. College parties, street festivals, even suburban garages. Social media made it worse. TikTok videos showed teenagers inhaling from balloons, laughing uncontrollably, unaware of the damage it caused. The headlines started to pile up. 2 dead after inhaling laughing gas at warehouse rave. Hospitals report spike in nitrous-related injuries. That's when the DEA took notice. The agency had ignored nitrous oxide for years, but a surge in illegal distribution caught their attention. They didn't know who was behind it, but they knew the gas was coming from somewhere inside the U.S. A task force called Project Silverveil was formed, a collaboration between the DEA, Customs, and Homeland Security. Their goal? Trace the supply chain. And that's where Agent Lauren Carter entered the story. Agent Carter had seen her share of narcotics cases, cocaine, fentanyl, meth. But this one was different. It didn't fit the pattern. There were no gangs, no cartels, no violent turf wars. Just paperwork, invoices, and a trail of numbers that didn't add up. Her first lead came from a flagged shipment in Boston, a container labeled dental anesthetic. The manifest listed a fake Belgian supplier. The cylinder codes matched others found in nightclub raids. Someone was moving massive quantities of medical gas through legitimate ports, hiding in plain sight. Carter's instincts told her it wasn't random. It was organized, sophisticated, and whoever was behind it knew the system better than most. By fall 2022, Carter's team had mapped the movement of over 5,000 liters of nitrous oxide, all traced to the same shell company, Aerolux Distributors. But Aerolux was clean on paper. Its taxes were paid, its website professional, its addresses legitimate. When agents visited the registered location, a small office suite in Maryland, they found a receptionist and a wall of framed licenses. Nothing illegal, nothing obvious. What they didn't know was that the real operation sat 30 miles away, inside a private warehouse leased under another company name. A warehouse with no sign, no cameras, and soundproofed walls. Inside, the tanks were stacked floor to ceiling, each labeled with fake batch numbers and expiration dates. Workers refilled smaller canisters, sealed them with counterfeit safety stickers, and shipped them out in unmarked vans. Evan called it logistics. The DEA called it smuggling. And while the agents closed in from one side, Evan was already planning his next move, expanding into California, where the party scene was booming again. In November, Evan sat alone in his office, staring at spreadsheets filled with numbers he could barely believe. Millions of dollars had flowed through Aerolux in less than 2 years. He told himself it wasn't really a crime. Nitrous oxide wasn't illegal to sell, just restricted. He wasn't dealing death, he told himself. Just laughter. But deep down, he knew. The laughter had stopped meaning anything a long time ago. And somewhere, Agent Carter was already watching. By the start of 2023, Project Silverveil had grown from a small task force to a full-blown federal operation. Dozens of agents, analysts, and customs officers were working around the clock, tracing shipping routes, reviewing manifests, and digging into companies no one had heard of. At the center of it all was Aerolux Distributors. Agent Lauren Carter sat in her office at the federal building in Washington, surrounded by stacks of paperwork. Every document told a story, shipments, invoices, forged signatures. But she needed proof, something she could put in front of a judge. Her instincts told her the operation wasn't just domestic. It was global. The same Belgian supplier appeared on multiple manifests, each one routed through different ports with identical documentation, an impossible coincidence. Carter had seen this kind of laundering before, but she also knew something else. This wasn't run by street-level smugglers. Whoever was behind Aerolux was educated, strategic, patient, and that made them dangerous. In late January, Carter got a tip, an email from a blocked address with one line: "You're looking in the right place, but you're not looking at the right people." Attached was a scanned invoice, Aerolux letterhead, dated 3 months earlier. The signature belonged to Maya Lopez. Carter's team ran her name and found she worked as a customs broker for a private import agency. No prior record, no red flags, but her recent travel history raised eyebrows. Frequent flights to Europe, unexplained deposits in her bank account, and a sudden resignation 2 weeks before the email arrived. When agents tracked her down in a small apartment outside Philadelphia, Maya looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. She agreed to talk, and what she said changed everything. Maya told them about Evan Riker, about the shipments, the Belgian supplier, the fake manifests, the encrypted messages she had been asked to send. "He told me it was harmless," she said. "Just nitrous. Not cocaine, not meth. He said nobody gets hurt." I believed him, until I didn't. When Carter asked what changed, Maya pulled out her phone and showed a video, one she said had haunted her ever since. It was footage from a warehouse rave in Detroit. The camera panned across a crowd of laughing teenagers inhaling balloons. Then suddenly a girl collapsed. The phone fell to the ground, still recording as people screamed. "That tank came from us," Maya whispered. That was all Carter needed to hear. Using Maya's intel, Carter's team traced the next shipment, a container scheduled to arrive at the port of Baltimore under Aerolux's name. But this time, they didn't intercept it. They followed it. A young undercover agent, Jason Hale, was assigned to pose as a logistics driver for one of the trucking companies Aerolux used. Hale was quiet, methodical, and willing to take risks. For 3 weeks, he transported sealed containers from the port to Aerolux's off-site warehouse, recording every route, every delivery, and every face he saw. Through a hidden camera on his dashboard, they captured Evan himself, calm, composed, directing workers in a spotless office above the floor. To the camera, he looked like any other businessman. But in that moment, Carter knew she was staring at the man behind the entire operation. On the surface, Evan Riker was still respected, a former anesthesiologist who had transitioned into medical logistics. He sponsored charity events, gave talks on medical ethics, even appeared in local newspaper features about successful young entrepreneurs. No one suspected him, but behind that calm demeanor was a man unraveling. His relationship with Maya had soured. His European contacts were demanding larger payments. And a new rumor in the underground scene claimed that federal agents were closing in on U.S. suppliers. Evan started to get paranoid. He changed his phone every week. He stopped using the office network. He even began vetting his own drivers, unaware that one of them, Jason Hale, was already feeding his every move to the DEA. By March, the operation was falling apart. Customs had begun tightening inspections on chemical imports. One shipment was seized in New Jersey, and though the paperwork was airtight, the timing was suspicious. Evan knew the circle was closing. He told his team to pause all operations until things cooled off. But greed has a way of ignoring reason. His Belgian supplier, a man known only as Duval, was furious. The product was already manufactured, already paid for. If Evan didn't take delivery, he'd lose both the gas and the money. Evan reluctantly agreed to one final shipment, 5,000 liters, routed through Boston under the name Aerolux Medical Supply Ltd. He told himself it would be his last deal, but it would be the one that destroyed him. Maya had been living under federal protection since her confession, helping the DEA build their case. But when Evan texted her out of the blue, "Need your help on one last shipment, then I'm out," she froze. It was the opportunity Agent Carter had been waiting for. Using Maya's phone, the DEA crafted careful responses. They arranged a meeting under the pretense of fixing customs paperwork, a face-to-face interaction they hoped would confirm Evan's involvement beyond doubt. But things didn't go as planned. Evan didn't show up at the agreed location. Instead, he sent one of his drivers, the same undercover agent, Jason Hale. When Hale handed Maya the envelope, she realized Evan was testing her. Inside were not documents, but a small USB drive labeled insurance. The message was clear. Evan didn't trust her anymore. 2 days later, the final shipment arrived at the port of Boston. Customs officers flagged the container, but per DEA instruction, allowed it to pass. Under surveillance, the truck made its way south through Connecticut, Delaware, and into Maryland. Every mile was tracked by drones and unmarked SUVs. Inside the warehouse, Evan waited. He was restless, sweating, chain-smoking. The calm precision that once defined him now gone. At 2:13 a.m., the truck pulled in. Workers began unloading the cylinders. And as Evan reached for his clipboard, the sound of engines filled the air. Black SUVs surrounded the building. Red and blue lights flashed through the fog. A raid, federal warrant. Evan froze. He knew it was over. They found over 5,000 liters of nitrous oxide, each cylinder stamped with forged serials and fake batch numbers. In a locked drawer upstairs, they found ledgers, handwritten lists of buyers, payments, and international transfers. Evan didn't resist. He didn't speak. As agents cuffed him, he looked around the warehouse. The tanks, the stacks of cash, the lives he had built on laughter and lies. Later, during interrogation, he finally broke his silence. "I never sold drugs," he said. "I sold air." But the agents didn't laugh. The news broke the next morning. Federal agents bust international laughing gas ring, doctor among those arrested. It became a national story overnight. Talk shows mocked the absurdity. But behind the headlines was a darker reality. A sophisticated criminal network that had exploited medical loopholes, endangered lives, and laundered millions through the global supply chain. Maya Lopez testified in court under federal protection. Her cooperation earned her leniency, though she would later admit she'd never stopped looking over her shoulder. Evan Riker was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for fraud, smuggling, and conspiracy. When asked by reporters if he regretted it, he paused before answering. "I thought I could control it. I thought it was harmless. Turns out, laughter kills too." 6 months after the raid, United States versus Evan Riker began at the Federal District Court in Maryland. The courtroom was small but crowded. Journalists, legal observers, and even former colleagues of the once respected doctor filled the benches. At the front, Evan sat quietly beside his lawyer, expression blank, hair longer, eyes hollow. Gone was the confident businessman who'd built an empire out of thin air. In his place sat a man undone by greed, by guilt, by the simple arrogance of thinking he could outsmart the system. Prosecutors presented their evidence in waves. Shipping manifests, encrypted emails, witness testimonies, and financial trails that linked Aerolux to offshore accounts. They painted a picture not of a misguided doctor, but of a deliberate criminal who'd exploited medicine to mask millions in illegal profits. The defense tried to soften the image, arguing that nitrous oxide wasn't an illegal narcotic, that Evan hadn't trafficked poison, merely misunderstood regulation. But it was Maya's testimony that silenced the courtroom. When she entered the courtroom, Maya looked nothing like the confident broker she once was. She avoided Evan's eyes as she took the stand. Her voice trembled, but her words were steady. She told the jury about the first shipment, about how Evan had convinced her that everyone was doing it, how the money came in faster than she'd ever seen, how she started to believe the lie that it was harmless. And then she described the video, the girl collapsing, the screams, the moment the laughter stopped. "I think that's when I realized we weren't moving gas," she said. "We were moving consequences." Evan didn't look up once. The courtroom fell silent. Even the judge paused before thanking her for her testimony. When she stepped down, Maya didn't look back. After 4 weeks, the jury deliberated for less than 6 hours. They found Evan Riker guilty on all major counts: conspiracy to defraud the United States, international smuggling, falsification of medical documentation, and endangering public health. The sentence: 12 years in federal prison with no chance of parole. When the verdict was read, Evan didn't react. No tears, no visible emotion, just a slow exhale, as if he'd been holding his breath for years. Outside, the media called it the laughing gas empire collapse. To them, it was bizarre and sensational, a story about a doctor gone rogue. But for those who had lived it, it was something much darker. Because beneath the headlines, the story wasn't about gas or greed. It was about how easy it was for a man to lose himself chasing something he thought he could control. Prison stripped away the last of Evan's illusions. Inside, he was just another inmate with a number. No more clean offices or imported suits. No more coded emails or offshore accounts. Just time, endless, heavy time. He spent most days in the prison library, reading legal books and medical journals. Other inmates called him Doc, sometimes mockingly, sometimes with strange respect. A few months into his sentence, a journalist requested an interview. Evan agreed, not to justify himself, but to understand what had happened. The recording, later obtained by true crime Mosaic, captured a broken man trying to make sense of the empire he built. Evan, It started as opportunity, then it became survival, then it became identity. When you start to believe your own lie, you stop seeing the line between right and wrong. He paused before adding, almost to himself, "The worst part is, I thought I was the smart one." The fallout from the Aerolux case rippled far beyond one man's conviction. In the months following the trial, lawmakers introduced new legislation to tighten control over nitrous oxide distribution. Importers now faced stricter verification, medical suppliers required more transparency, and recreational sale bans expanded across multiple states. Media coverage reignited debates about gray market substances, the kind of legal loopholes that blurred the line between medicine and misuse. Hospitals began implementing tracking systems for anesthetic gases. Customs added specialized screening for chemical imports. The laughing gas era, as journalists called it, had ended. But for those who'd lived through it, the echoes lingered. In the wreckage of lives, the broken trust, and the haunting question of how many other operations still hid behind legitimate faces. After the trial, Maya Lopez disappeared from the public eye. The federal program gave her a new name, a new city, and a quiet desk job far from ports and customs. She never spoke publicly again. But in one anonymous interview years later, she said something that stayed with investigators. Evan wasn't evil. He just stopped asking if what he was doing mattered. Those words became the closing line in multiple documentaries about the case. Simple, unassuming, but painfully true. Agent Lauren Carter was promoted shortly after the case closed. But she often said it was one of the few victories that didn't feel like one. She'd spent years chasing cartels, fentanyl networks, major traffickers. But this case, she said, felt different. It wasn't blood or violence that built his empire, she told a journalist. It was paperwork, and that's what scared me most. Because in the end, it wasn't a weapon or a gang that moved 5,000 liters of gas into American streets. It was bureaucracy, loopholes, the quiet kind of crime that hides in plain sight. Years later, the warehouse where Aerolux once stood is gone. The land was bought by a logistics company and turned into a sterile office park. No trace of the tanks, the fumes, or the empire that once operated behind closed doors. But if you listen closely, locals say you can still hear it. That faint metallic hiss when the wind moves through the empty loading docks. A sound that once meant laughter. Now it's just a reminder that, in the pursuit of profit, even the most harmless things can turn deadly. Evan Riker will be eligible for release in 2034. By then, the world will have forgotten his name. But his story of ambition, greed, and the quiet dangers hiding in plain sight remains a warning. Because sometimes, crime doesn't come with gunfire or bloodshed. Sometimes it comes with a laugh. And that laugh echoes longest when it dies.